We are live. Welcome, everybody. This is Peter Voogd, founder of the prestigious Game Changers Academy. And thanks again for tuning into our Monthly Millionaire video series where we interview the world's most elite and successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and real game changers. People that I personally have massive respect for that are not just making a huge difference in their industries, but really in the world. And I've been pumped about this call with Chase Jarvis for a while. Well before we nailed him down. It's hard to nail you down, Chase. You're traveling and all over the place. When we finally nailed him down, I was extremely excited, mainly because the value I think this interview can add to you guys watching as well. He's the CEO and founder of Creative Live, which I've had a great pleasure of being at the studio multiple times. Amazing organization. It's the largest live streaming education company right now, which is great. He's an artist, but known as a visionary photographer and a creative genius. Multi-talented entrepreneur who has made millions doing what he really truly loves. As a photographer, as a director, he's won a lot of awards. I was going to list all the awards, but there was too many. From some of the biggest and most prestigious publications, Photo District News magazine recently listed Chase as one of the top 30 influential photographers of the past decade. And earlier in his career as a film maker of short films, he worked with major brands such as Apple, Starbucks, Nike, and some big artists as well as Pearl Jam. But one thing that really stood out to me personally is how admired he is, not only in his space, but within his companies. As the CEO, he's very involved in the businesses, but everyone I talked to that knew him, that was an employee of his or a friend, had nothing but amazing things to say about him. So I know he's a world-class human being as well as a great entrepreneur. So Chase, welcome, man, and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, I recorded that. I'm gonna play that back anytime I feel bad about myself.
Oh, I love it. I want to start with this real quick. I've read a couple different places and I wanted to get clarity on this. Your goal is to be as creative as possible towards every single thing you do, always. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think that creativity is one of the things that separates us from all the other species on the planet. We can put two unlikely things together and make something new and novel. And ideally we do that for good. And I have the experience of both, personally experiencing it and witnessing it around the world that the best things in life, whether it's solution to the biggest problems we'll ever know or the best ideas, unlocking the potential of the human race, is all founded and based in creativity. So, of course, there's some fundamental things that you have to have in order to be creative. You have to have health, you have to have wellness, you have to have a sound mind, but ultimately, creativity is the thing that I feel like is the game changer, to use your show's name, for our experience on this amazing planet. So
now, do you remember back? Have you always been creative? Like, do you remember instances when you were like 3, 4, 5, or early days when you used to be creative and use your creativity differently in school? Maybe. Well, do you have those memories?
That's something I want your listeners to understand, is that the system that we are currently living in actually trains creativity out of people. It's one of the reasons that Creative Live exists. It's one of the reasons that I turned my entire life focus to creativity. Is we have a school system, we have a culture that programs. It's advantageous for the system to take creativity out of the system. If you think about the school system, for example, it's based on the factory, which is a 200-year-old concept where you put things like raw material in one end and you mold it to look just like every other thing in the assembly line. At the end of that assembly line, you kick out things that are the same thing, that are not individual, that are not unique, that are not different. And that's just a really efficient system. And that worked well when the primary economic means was creating a factory to create wealth or economy or all that stuff, 200 years ago. It's also based on a farm. The school system is the reason we have 3 months off in the summer, is so you can literally go work in the crops. So, I mean, there's, infinitesimally small number of farmers today relative to what there was, 100 years ago. So those two things, the factory and the farm, those are dictating what our school experience is like. And I think those are miserable and terrible, and they train creativity out of you just by the nature of the framework of what they're built on. So, I felt like as a young person, I was extremely creative. If you ask a room full of like 6-year-olds, hey, who wants to come draw a picture on the wall for me? 100, like every person in the room will put their hand up. And then you ask that same question 5 years later and 5 years later, and you're cutting that group that's willing to be creative in front of other people. You continue to cut that group in half. So I was very creative as a young person. I went into school and realized, wait a minute, creative meant sort of weird and different and self-expressive. So I did what a lot of kids want to do, is just fit in. And I went and was the captain of the football team. I happened to be a good athlete, so was the captain of the football team, captain of the soccer team, went to college on a soccer scholarship, and sort of ran away from the creativity. And to be clear, I'm white, like lower middle class background, but had almost every advantage that you can have. And so if it was hard for me to break through and to want to be different and want to be creative and express myself and take risks, how hard must it be for so many other people? And those, that ecosystem combines to make me really frustrated and energized around how to make that possible for a new generation of entrepreneurs, a new generation of creatives. So yes, I've always been creative. Yes, I repressed the hell out of that for a decade or two in order to fit in, only to realize as a young adult, maybe in my early 20s, 19, 20, wait a minute, what the fuck am I doing? This is I'm undermining my life in order to fit into everybody else's box. And so if there's one thing that you take away from our conversation today that your listeners or watchers do, it's that is the absolutely wrong thing. That is, you are unique. Your goal should be to aspire to live what's in here and project that out there to connect with other people. I'm wary of shoulds, telling people what they should do, but this is one thing that I know for real, that your ability to connect with things that are meaningful to you and express those, manifest those outwardly, that's what you're put on this planet to do. So yes, I was creative. It was a long road to figuring that shit out, but that's one of the reasons that Creative Live exists. That's one of the reasons I'm on any show, is to make sure that people understand that.
What was the discovery process after soccer? Sure. Was it traveling? Was it connecting with people that were doing things that you wanted to do, or was it just a mess in a way?
I think that's a fair question, and I think I dodged it a little bit. It's because the answer's messy, and I'm trained to not say this shit on TV, because TV, you have a 10-second soundbite.
This ain't TV.
No, but in a long-form world like this, it really is. It's messy, and I think the belief that you're just going to wake up one day, I don't want to be a soccer player, I want to be a artist, and here's the 5 things I want to do, and that's just fiction. That doesn't happen. Yeah. But it's a combination of expressing yourself in all those different ways, of experimenting, of deciding who you want to spend your time with, of trusting your intuition. So for me personally, I did. My grandfather died the day before I graduated college, and it was a mess. It was a pain in the ass. It was horrible. But the silver lining was he gave me his cameras in his will. And so I had just graduated. I realized that I'm not going to play pro soccer. I quit the Olympic development soccer team, and I had these cameras. And so I threw them in a bag and went on a walk. And it just happened to be a 6-month-long walk with my then girlfriend, now wife, Kate.
That's awesome. Yeah, 6-month walk.
With all the money in my bank account, I sold the stock that my grandma gave me when I was, turned 15 or whatever, and just went and lived out of a bag. And it's in those moments where you're allowing yourself to be uncertain, and people are saying, right now, if you're at home, I don't have, $5,000 to go travel for 6 months. Well, I don't care if it's, pack your bags and hitchhike across the country. It's just some sort of getting out of the routine that you've been in, which can help sort of raise the awareness. That's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to, where can you go? What can you do? What mood can you put yourself in such that you can be aware of the dialogue that's actually happening in here and pay attention to that intuition? I'll say Tony Robbins, I think Tony does a million things well, but one of the things is, I'll try and get this right. The state of mind that you're in is the most important thing, because the state can control the story. And the story that you tell yourself is directly responsible for what kind of strategies you can use in your life. So if you try and go straight to the strategy, I know exactly what to do, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. If you don't have the right story that you're telling yourself, and you're not in a good emotional mental state, you can't actually get to the right strategy. So, these things that I'm talking about and the things that I did in a post-college, post-soccer world were all trying to change my mental state, to try and decouple my life from the life that everybody else wanted me to live, such that I could tell myself a story, a true story, that everything is possible, that everything around you is built by nobody smarter than you. All of the people that you see, whether it's on television or in your career or around you in your life, they're no smarter, no better, no more deserved than you are. You have to tell yourself the story and understand that those are facts, such that you can then have a path with strategies that will get you there, whether it's paying attention to your online mentors, to your peers, and to actually do something, to take steps to try and start a business, to try and whether it's raise money for a startup or create something and create a product that other people might do. Like, I think those things, regardless of the details for me personally, that's the way I thought about it. In hindsight, is create the state that you want so that you can tell yourself the right story. And maybe you're in a great emotional state. Maybe you understand that the world is your oyster. Great. Then what's the story you're going to tell yourself? What can you be, become, do? What inspires you? Put all that shit on a piece of paper and say, like, what's my next step? It doesn't have to be a life step. You're not planning the next 50 years of your life. You're planning the next month or two.
You really practice what you preach. There is a couple different people that said that you really didn't know your exact worth when you started out at a young age. You used to pull numbers just out of thin air when you started. When someone asked you, hey, what's your fee? You're like, 10 grand. And you're like, holy shit, they said yes. Is that a true story or something similar? That's hilarious.
Absolutely true. And I think
that's hilarious.
The thing that I did know is that you position yourself. If you are doing anything but, if you feel like you are being positioned, some cork in the tide mentality just bobbing around, you have to fit into your current ecosystem. I know that to be not true because I've watched, brands come from, go from nothing to, the first day or the first week, month, year they were in business. They've intentionally positioned themselves that way. I watched it happen with just whether it's brands or other people. And if not them, then, if them, then why not me? And so it was somewhat of an experiment, especially when you have to have a base acumen of business. You have to have a base acumen of mastery of your craft. But once you have that, it's an intentional decision where you're putting yourself in your market. And it was almost, I'd say a test, but that gives it too much credibility because it was more of an instinct. And I wanted to be a high end, I wanted to put myself in the upper end of the market where I would rather not work 1,000 days and for $1 a day and instead work one day for 1,000. And of course, that's not to say I wasn't mastering my craft and doing everything I could behind the scenes, but I wanted to step off the elevator at the highest floor that I possibly could on day one. And to be clear, the industry as a photographer and a director, it doesn't tolerate incompetence. It's a small industry and everybody talks, so you got to be able to walk the talk. But I think there's a pretty popular video of myself and Gary Vee talking about this exact thing. I did it with photography and said, how much, what does it cost for you to take a picture for come out for the day? And I think I said $2,500. And they said, great, well, we'll take it for 6 days on blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I should have said $5,000.
Yeah.
Same, Gary's the same thing. Like, what's your speaking fee? And it's like, 1,000. And the guy's like, great, come out next week. And he's like, oh, I thought that was for a 10-minute talk. You want a 15-minute talk? Oh, that's 10 grand. So there's sort of, you're constantly writing the rules. And there is...
And rewriting.
Yeah, writing and rewriting. And the rules are meant to be broken. The rules were put there by and large, the rules in business and in life are put there by other people as a mechanism to try and control the people who are coming up behind them. If you own the mechanism, if you own the means of distribution, if you own the dialogue culturally or publicly, then you can set the rules. And the rules for people who are willing to follow those rules, it does exactly what that comment I talked about earlier, that what the factory does, it controls your mindset, it controls your ability to not think outside the box. And if you can think of the rules rather than as put there to help you and support you, the rules are there to control you. And ultimately knowing when to break the rules, because let's be honest, if you sort of walked into a bank and you just hopped up on the counter and you started grabbing money out of the till, you didn't follow those rules, it's not going to go very well. So there's a time and a place. You have to participate in the system long enough to understand the rules. And when you understand the rules, that's when you can start pushing on those walls. And, to go back to your original question, like that's all I've done is pushed where I was in the system long enough to understand where there was softness, and then push on the things that were soft. And when they fall over and you can just walk into the next room and like, wow, that was easy. I didn't know. I thought I was trapped in that box the whole time. It's just a series of doing that over and over again. And it's not without respect. And respect that cuts both ways, because you have to respect the system enough to know how to work it, or to know how to beat it, or know how to participate in it. But ultimately, I think your folks who are watching probably have a sense of what I'm talking about.
Where have you seen entrepreneurs and creatives in your experience mess up over and over and over again, where you just want to shake them like, what are you doing? Is there anything that kind of comes to mind?
Sure. I'll go back to something I said earlier, which is being intentional about where you want to fit in the market. To think that you have to be subject to what other people tell you. I remember there's 100 instances of, even my own dad, who I think is an incredible guy. He's been a big inspiration in my life. When I told him what I wanted to charge for my services, he thought I was crazy. And these are people that know you, that trust you, that believe in you, but are still sort of framing that no, you have to fit into the market and you have to do X, Y, Z, before you can take an active role in positioning yourself. So that's a really consistent mistake. I think not thinking big enough is another mistake. That small thought creates small action. Small action is good in the sense of a habit, but small action to create small outcomes is not a good position. So ultimately, thinking big is, I don't want to portray. I was on a panel recently, I moderated a panel where there was a billionaire who was just on the panel shouting about how, maybe not a billionaire, many hundred millionaire, and just talking about how everybody should try and create a moonshot X and change the way we breathe and change language and fly to Saturn and go to Mars, and I don't think that's.
I know who you're talking about. We won't say names.
Specifically, that's not what I'm speaking about here. When I'm thinking think big, I'm thinking think big for yourself. What do you want for you? What's possible in a single life? And I just see people consistently underestimate what's possible in a single life. I think that is one thing that looking at other folks that you admire, finding mentors, being inspired by what's possible. That's one way that I really like looking at what other folks are doing, because it's a reminder of what's possible. So I think that's the second thing, is people sell themselves short. They don't think big enough. And then I'll flip that 180 degrees and say, another thing is that how do you get there? You get there by very small daily habits. There is no sort of leapfrog. Every person who's had a massive breakthrough, it's like, say your goal is to raise $5 million to go out and build your thing. Well, raising $5 million is actually, it's really not worth celebrating. It's what you just did is you took a $5 million loan out against your own head. And if you don't have a plan, you don't have a clear vision, you can't actually do the tactics that are going to get you there. All you've done is kneecap yourself. There's no catapult, and anyone who ever has experienced a breakthrough moment realizes that on the backside of a breakthrough moment is a bunch of hard work, because the breakthrough lasts about as long as, if you have a breakout single, we have a term in our culture called a one-hit wonder. But how many people had a #1 song that went to shit the next week and never had a career? There's millions of those, and there's only hundreds or thousands of people that were able to replicate that. So that's where I like the the grit, the day-to-day habits that are going to get you there. So what are those things that you feel like are small steps that can make it so that you create opportunities for yourself to win over and over and over? So those are three things. I guess I remember what the first one was. The second one was not thinking big enough. The first one was not positioning yourself in the market. The second one was not thinking big enough. And the third one, ironically, is like, how can you think small? Like, what is an action that you can take today that puts you closer to where you want to be?
Huge. I love that. For you personally, how you deal with the negative thoughts, what are some methods you use to get rid of the doubt and fear and replace it with confidence and certainty? Is it something that you've adapted the last 10 years, or is it a mechanism or a tactic or maybe a mix of both to get rid of those negative thoughts?
Yeah. The best way that I have realized to handle it for myself is to own the morning. I do not I protect my mornings viciously. And by protecting them, what I mean is carving out enough time such that I can start my day with things that are going to put me in a position in that state to be able to tell the right story, to be able to activate the right strategies and tactics throughout the day. And if you wake up and the first thing you do is check your email, and then you get sucked into responding to a bunch of shitty emails about stuff that you don't care about, which I'll tell you, 95% of the people, when I ask them, oh, you're struggling in your life, what's the first 2 hours of your day look like? I will tell you that 9 out of 10 people have that morning part all fucked up. They don't know how to own their own day. And for me, the ability to carve out the time to, also I'll cite Tony Robbins. He calls this priming, which is you're literally like taking care of yourself such that you're predisposed to your own messages, the psychology that you put. That's the difference. I mean, the difference between, I would say, Michael Jordan and somebody else behind him, or LeBron James and someone else who's less well known, they have a really similar physical set of attributes. Height, speed, agility, but it's a mental difference that's the big lever. And so the people I know who are the most successful, I was talking to Tim Ferriss the other day, and I'm in his book, Tools of Titans, or Tools for Titans, which is about this thick, and it's a reference guide after him interviewing 200 people. And the number one most common thread of the 200 most successful billionaires, world game changers that he interviewed was they have some sort of mindfulness practice, some sort of awareness practice that puts them in a psychological mental state to win. And so to me, that's, to answer Tyler's question very directly, I spend the first piece of every day putting myself in the right state, the right psychology, and telling myself the right story about what I want to do, how I want to be impactful, how I want to, have gratitude towards my day, such that when I go out in the day, I feel ready.
So you have books out, you have a lot of social media, you have websites. Where's the best place they can find out more about you?
I'd say actually pay attention to Creative Live. It's super highly curated. Folks like Peter, I've dropped a bunch of names throughout the course of this broadcast. You can sample all of our content live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But underneath that layer of free experience of learning, there's more than 1,500 classes from the world's top experts. And if you're stuck in any area of your business, whether it's a motivational hurdle or a tactical one about building some aspect of your business, we have classes for that stuff. So first and foremost, check out Creative Live. Second of all, I'm just Chase Jarvis on all of the social media stuff. Long time ago, I created an app that was the app of the year in 2010, a photo sharing app that predated all the photo sharing apps that are out there. That, from some legal reasons, that kept me from being on Instagram, like about 2 months ago. So my Instagram's
fresh on Instagram. Let's follow him. Make sure you follow him. He has some amazing pictures I was checking out this morning.
Thank you. So that's a thing, but you know where to find me. I'm just @ Chase Jarvis, and do pay attention to Creative Live. It truly is a game-changing platform.
And your 30 Days of Genius is exceptional. You've interviewed people, Jared Leto, Richard Branson, Tim Ferriss, all kinds of amazing, Neil Strauss, Damon John, Mark Cuban. I would check out his stuff. He's an amazing interviewer. I've tried to learn a lot from you interviewing as well. So hopefully we did a good job today. But I appreciate you, man.
/genius, and you can just click that blue button, and then you'll get all 30 of those interviews in your inbox.
Amazing. Well, you have an amazing day. I see you're at the studio right now. Tell everyone there I said what's up, Kim and all them and Chris. I appreciate you dearly, man, and I'm looking forward to building our relationship.